Thank you. The Atlantic region, we've talked a few times at the conference about the needs for the research to be done, and after the last session just before lunch, one of the topics that wasn't on the list that I'm wondering if maybe we should have is around passion, but not looking at absolutely everything that Francesca mentioned was the source of his passion, but I think there's a lot of passion for the work that we do, and why people do it for as long as they do is something that I think is very important to the sector. We too have a number of people in the Atlantic area who have been long-term settlement professionals, and so there is something to be said for looking at that. Further to what Vicki said, the sources for what I'm about to speak about are looking at the pan-Canadian themes for research. There were a number of community summits held across Atlantic Canada over the last year, especially leading up to our latest funding proposal to CIC. And then the ERISA agencies, what is the focus and experience of the settlement sector, and what are the needs that we see for research? And all of this especially has the overlay of the incoming refugees that are coming from Syria. So we keep all of those things in mind when we look at this. And I also wanted to say that although there's still work to be done, I am very encouraged by the relationship building between the settlement sector and the researchers. We've come a long way with that in the time that I've been doing this work, and so I am encouraged, and hopefully that continues to advance. So the first slide. There's been a lot of research around what are the barriers that immigrants face when they're going out into the labor market, but the flip side of that is what research can we do around what the barriers are that the employers have? What are their attitudes and concerns, especially when hiring for mid-management positions? And so taking a closer look at that would be very helpful. And then realistic opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship in smaller centers and rural areas. And something that was mentioned in our session yesterday was around location. Where are people going and why? And that has a lot to do with jobs, obviously. And then the IMDb research and the stats, what does that tell us and how do we use that, especially for longitudinal studies? Education, and this is education for immigrants themselves. What are the options to address gaps in service for young adult refugees, those who have been in camps and they're too old for high school, yet they need literacy, academic, and language support? So what are the options that are best suited to align them for success? And then what are the experience of refugees with the adult basic education, and that's in the Newfoundland area in particular. How can we help them get access to programs they need? What are the gaps, and how are the learning outcomes working? And when we look at that, there's the overlay of partnerships. When we're looking at the pan-Canadian themes, partnerships, at-risk populations, and mental health, social cultural inclusion, all those themes overlay on top of the education. And that's one of the things that we really need to keep in mind. Each of the themes, there's a lot of interconnection between them. Professional development, so this is still education, but professional development for the settlement organization staff. What are the roles, responsibilities, and boundaries of the settlement staff as they're helping newcomers integrate? And that's particularly important when we're dealing with vulnerable refugee situation. And then, in addition to that, risk management and governance for our boards of directors. And some of the key topics there are around child protection, insurance, professional and personal boundaries for them as well. Children and youth, and this is the Y, where I work, has been doing specialized programs for children and youth for over 25 years. And it's really, again, heartening and encouraging to see many other organizations realize this is a very specific and special population. So what are their experiences, and how do we give more voice to that? What are their experiences with racism, discrimination, prejudice, and what's the impact on their settlement in their daily lives? And on the flip side of that, what are the success stories? So when we have schools, community agencies working together, how are we able to highlight the success stories of what works so that we can emulate that in other situations? And then finally, welcoming communities. General attitudes in the communities in the Atlantic region. And I grew up in the Atlantic region. I know all the good things and all the bad things about being in Atlantic Canada. So what is the information that we need to glean in our communities there? And there is a lot of backlash right now around the Syrian refugee, and how do we flip that? What are some things that we can do more than in our settlement work to turn that around? How do we help rural areas grow, settlement and resettlement? And so encouraging newcomers to rural areas, what is there for them? How do we shape the landscape of Atlantic Canada in terms of economics? And best ways to get positive messaging out and the social, cultural fabric of our communities. We're a changing and dynamic community and a changing and dynamic country, so how do we make the best of that? What is the research informed that we can emulate in other areas outside of the main settlement places? And again, economics, partnerships, social, cultural inclusion, all of that overlays on top of all of that work. And that's it.
Great.
Thank you.